I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Canon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
We are continuing on this journey. But first, before we get to our main feature, let's get to our sponsor for the month, Virtual MarsCon 2021. Yes, unfortunately, 2020 is still around in some capacity, as we've seen. The pandemic is not going away anytime soon, so MarsCon is going virtual this year, and we'll put that ad that we have right here.
The world's longest running comedy music concert series is coming from inside your house!
Wow, that went to a dark place.
Virtual MarsCon 2021 is taking place online for free on March 12th, 13th, and 14th.
Hi, MarsCon!
This year's event will have live stream performances by The Great Luke Ski, Devo Spice, Worm Quartet, Insane Ian, TV's Kyle and Linzilla, Il Nage, Beth Kinderman, Tom Smith, Throwing Toasters, Amy Englehart, an AMA interview with Ookla the Mop, and this year's music guest of honor, Robbie Ellis. We'll also be doing a virtual Q&A with the man who has been playing drums in Weird Al Yankovic's band for over 40 years, John Bermuda Schwartz. Drum solo! For info on how to watch, go to MarsCon.com. And for info on the comedy music track, go to MarsConComedy.com.
And do watch out for flying lobsters.
Thanks for listening, funny music fans. And I hope to see you all at Virtual MarsCon 2021.
Yeah, MarsCon.
Cannot wait. If you want to hear fun music and chat by comedy people, and also maybe chat with us in whatever chat feature or Zoom call they've got going on.
Yeah.
I know both of us will be there with bells on.
Yeah, and all of the music from the concerts of last year's MarsCon is available for our digital album that you can get on the MarsCon Comedy website. And a 30-minute preview of the album is there as well for free. So you can go over there. If you're kind of curious of what MarsCon is, there's the album for you. Check it out. It's fun.
Yeah, I always look forward to the MarsCon compilations every year. Because I get to look back and go, I remember that. I was in the front row.
I know. I was sitting right next to you. Anyway, let's move on to our little... We do have some news stories that came out over the last week. Ryan Coogler, the director of Black Panther, has been picked up by Disney Plus to produce a Wakanda series. So this might be the bridging of the gap, as it were, between Black Panther and Black Panther 2, especially with Chadwick Boseman passing away suddenly last year.
Yeah. Man, rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah.
I watched what was his final performance in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Man, that man had some talent. If you've never seen him in anything other than Black Panther, please go look up some of his other work. It's incredible.
Incredible actor. And I'm curious because, we've seen a little bit of the Wakandan lifestyle in the first Black Panther movie, but an entire series exploring this world, the city, this country, of that we've only skimmed the surface of. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what tactic they're taking with it, because I don't think they know yet either, really. This seems to be extremely early planning stages. However, there is that scene at the beginning of Black Panther where they go on the kind of rescue mission.
Mm-hmm.
And they get the women and stuff that were being taken. And I kind of like the idea of Wakanda being kind of like Batman, but for Africa. Where it's like something happens and the Wakandans just kind of show up and nobody quite knows where they came from or where they return to, but if something goes down on the continent of Africa, Wakanda just shows up and helps out.
I like this idea. Kind of like Wakandan Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Kinda. I don't know. It would fit, that Wakanda, like, doesn't really want to interact with the outside world, but at the same time they want to take care of their own people.
It's an interesting take.
I don't know.
I'm very looking forward to this Wakanda series.
I want everything about Wakanda. It's a great setting.
Yeah. Second news story, as breaking news, because it was announced the day we're actually recording this, Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, the 1997 version, is coming to Disney Plus days after where this episode is being released. Friday the 12th. That is the version with Brandy as Cinderella, Whitney Houston as the fairy godmother, Jason Alexander, Whoopi Goldberg, Bernadette Peters. A lot of people have been asking this for a while. Yeah, a lot of people have been asking that this should be on Disney Plus, and I assume that they were able to settle any issues involving the actual Rodgers and Hammerstein music, because that is not in public domain as far as I'm aware.
No, but I mean, Disney has the money to license that. I mean, it's
yeah.
fine.
I mean, they just announced the entirety of the Muppet Show is coming, and Dinosaurs is apparently uncut, even with the license, the very few licensed music that they did use in that show.
Yeah, which is good. I hate when they have to chop things up like that. I feel like this version of Cinderella is one of those things that, it got a lot of flack when it came out. I don't know how well you remember it, but I remember it extremely well, that it was a massive point of contention when this thing came out. Critics were very harsh to it.
I think it was just they were comparing it to the previous version from the 50s and the 60s that in those critics' mind were still, nostalgic to them.
Yeah, but I feel like it's thought of a little better by our generation. I think it's one of those things of, at the time adults were very harsh to it, but people who were our age were like, no, I can kind of dig this.
And especially, this being Black History Month, you're going to have Black kids see, a live action Black Disney princess.
Yeah. I mean, Cinderella is Black, the fairy godmother is Black, the queen is Black, there's a lot of characters in there. The prince is Asian.
Yeah.
In that one, they did a colorblind casting, and that was one of the biggest points of contention for people at the time. It got a lot of flack for that. How is there a white guy is king and a Black woman is queen and their son is Asian? That kind of thing.
But they'll turn around and say cast based on talent, not based on skin color.
Yeah. Well, they only ever seem to say that when they think the most talented person has pale skin, don't they? But anyway, I if you've never seen it, I would recommend going and watching it. It was not, in my memory, it is not that bad. It's actually really fun and watchable, and Brandy does very well in it, and all the other cast does as well. The prince is pretty engaging, at least in my memory, but I haven't seen this thing in so long because it hasn't really been available, and they didn't really replay it a lot.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to watch it again. See if it holds up or if I glossed over some things in my memory.
You will believe it's possible for a plain yellow pumpkin to become a golden carriage.
Indeed.
Especially since we just did the original Cinderella a few weeks ago. It'd be nice to compare the two.
Yeah, because Disney did try to tie it to their Cinderella, even though they are not. The Rodgers and Hammerstein play is not based on the Disney Cinderella. But they did try to put Brandy in a blue dress that was very much like the one from the animated film, and I mean, they tried to be like, hey, Disney Cinderella, remember Disney Cinderella? Like they really did try to put that in the production design. So
I'm definitely putting that on the list for a potential future episode.
Yeah, we might get to that before the end of the year. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, so let's get to our main feature. We are continuing looking at the unsung Disney princesses, those that are not part of the official princess canon. You have your Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora, Ariel, Jasmine, and so on and so forth. But there were a few that kind of slipped through the cracks, and you cannot buy a doll of these at your local store. So this week we are looking at Princess Kida from Atlantis, the Lost Empire. This is during that experimental phase of Disney that we've talked about before, starting in 2000. The Broadway musical style that they had been doing since The Little Mermaid has what's waning. People were not really wanting to see essentially, well, a lot of people were saying the same movie over and over again that Disney was releasing, even though they were very different. But the general audience was saying, oh, here's another Disney movie based off a fairy tale, and it's a musical. They give us something new. And they did. I mean, 2000, they released 3 movies: Fantasia 2000, Dinosaur, and Emperor's New Groove. And all 3 of those movies were completely different to what Disney had been doing for the 10 years prior.
Yeah. And I would argue this is by far my favorite thing they released in the experimental era.
And especially since we've already covered a few of them already. We've covered Lilo and Stitch, Treasure Planet, and Meet the Robinsons. Most of those movies...
Lilo and Stitch is a close second for me. I'm not knocking Lilo and Stitch, y'all. You know how much I loved that movie when I finally saw it. But, ooh, you're going to hear how close to my heart this movie is, I think, over the course of this podcast.
Yeah. So this movie, to kind of started, this had the same team that did Hunchback of Notre Dame, and the team got together after working on the film and said, we're a pretty good team, let's stick together and do another movie together. But they didn't want to do it based off of previous work, and they didn't want to do it as a musical. In one of the person's verbiage, they did a Fantasyland movie, they want to do an Adventureland movie. Which, again, you can't blame them for that. This was that era where Disney was trying to do new things, new ways of storytelling, especially with the rise of Pixar and DreamWorks at this time. I mean, they were not doing anything like Disney was doing, and they were getting all the critical acclaim.
Yeah, I mean, I can get it. We've talked about this period of Disney before. I find it interesting the sort of people they got to work on this who sort of dipped their toe in and then went on to go do other things.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we talked about it when we talked about Treasure Planet.
Yeah.
But the first scriptwriter attached to this was Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
This was, he did the first draft of the script, I believe, all the way through, and then they brought in another writer when he left to go do other projects. Whedon claims there's nothing much left of him in this, that they basically rewrote everything he wrote.
But it was
It
was enough that he still got credit in this movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's more a contractual thing, but I don't know. Watching this movie, I'm not saying that it like screams Joss Whedon, but if you watched this movie and then somebody said like the original script was Joss Whedon, you can kind of go, yeah, I could see that. So I think that there's maybe more of his spirit in the final product than he realizes, maybe. I don't know.
Another thing was, creating the Atlantean agriculture, the architecture, I should say. They were pretty much banned from using anything Greek. Again, they had just done Hercules, and they did not want to be seen as copying themselves. So they went with Mayan ideas, Incan ideas, all these different cultures that their primarily American audience would not be familiar with, to kind of give it a bit of an otherworldly feel. And it really does work in this movie, at least to me.
Yeah. And if you've ever looked at the character designs for this and gone like, why do they seem so familiar? One of the production designers of this film is Mike Mignola, who created Hellboy.
Yeah, that was, and a lot of people
and this has a very lesser Disney style because of that. But you can tell if you look at the characters' hands. The hands of some of the characters have that very kind of blocky style that Mignola is known for. And so they don't quite have this sort of, Disney hands tend to be very like slender and defined and stuff, and Mike Mignola is kind of like, draw some squares and put them on a palm. It's like they're much more distinctive, and a lot of the characters have that same thing, especially the main villain of the movie, Rourke. His hands are very much Hellboy style hands. He's got these giant meaty hands that which fits his character, But I love it. And it's a very interesting visual style that doesn't look like anything Disney really did up to that point, or even a lot of stuff since. They really haven't kind of returned to that style. It's very cool.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the Atlantean language that was created for this movie.
Well, I want you to know that this podcast just doubled in length with that statement. Settle in, folks. I'll try to gloss over this because I know nobody cares about this as much as I care about this.
You're a linguist. You're going to care about languages.
Yeah, this movie is actually one of the reasons I'm a linguist. This was a lesser inspiration, but still an inspiration for my linguistics degree. But this movie had a constructed language created by one of the gods of conlanging, Mark Okrand. Mark Okrand is best known because he created the Klingon language. That is his most prominent thing to date. He's now retired from doing this sort of work. He's moved on to other things, so he's not really the guy that they call anymore. The guy they call now is a friend of mine, David J. Peterson. He worked on Game of Thrones, and a lot of stuff in the MCU. So he's out there, he's doing the thing, he's carrying on. But before him, Mark Okrand was the guy you called if you wanted a fictional language for your film. So he wanted to create a language that was very much a sort of bridge language, because the idea is that the Atlanteans can speak all of these modern languages. When the crew kind of finally meets them, they're able to speak French and Italian and Latin at one point, English and everything. And it's because their language is supposedly the root of most other languages, which is it's a somewhat debated point among linguists whether or not there's actually like a singular root language for all of humanity. But he tried to pull bits of grammar and vocabulary from, not so much grammar, but especially vocabulary from a whole bunch of different languages. So he had some European languages, and he had a little bit of like Hebrew, and he had some North and South American indigenous languages that he would pull a little bit from. And he kind of mixed all that together in a big stew that became this language. And the sad thing is for some constructed languages, you can find like treasure troves and books and entire websites and textbooks and stuff, about how to speak the language and how to, this is one of those conlangs that like people remember it, but they never really expanded upon it.
And yeah, a lot of it had to do with the fact that this movie really bombed at the box office.
Yeah, unfortunately. But it does have a beautiful script. It does have a written language that is gorgeous, that was created by one of the production design team.
John Emerson, it says here.
Yeah, John Emerson, and he was not so much a linguist. He was just an artist that was kind of like, let me look at a bunch of different languages and see how they're put together and kind of take bits and pieces of that. It is an alphabetic language. Like it does have like each character represents a sound. It's not like each character represents an idea or a word on its own, like some things like Chinese or whatever.
They started us off right at the beginning of the movie, but each Atlantean letter corresponding to a letter in the English alphabet, which is weird, but it gets us to
more or less. There are fewer letters in the Atlantean alphabet, and a lot of them do sounds that like, SH or TH is a single sound, but we write it with two letters in English. They would just write it with one character. That would be sh or th, or that doesn't come across very. It's
very much in like the Japanese language.
A little bit more. But some of the things we would consider letter combinations, they're just single glyphs in the Atlantean language.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It's really beautiful. If you're just into kind of lettering and scripts and stuff, it's really gorgeous.
This movie is an action movie. This is a straight up action movie. A lot of similarities to a movie that we've talked about a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago. That would be Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, they really wanted an Indiana Jones-ish style movie.
Although we're not going to see Milo brandishing a whip here.
Well, no. He doesn't have, Indiana Jones was weird in that he had the academic background, but he could also hold himself in a fight, and that is not Milo.
No, he is pure
Milo is 100% academic, 0% physical prowess. Just no.
The crew had a slogan for this movie: fewer songs, more explosions.
To the point where a character just literally says, I like making stuff blow up. I mean, it's,
So yeah, they wanted this to be Disney's Indiana Jones before they bought Indiana Jones.
Yeah, it ended up being Disney's Stargate.
Yeah.
This movie is super duper chunks of Stargate mixed in with little bits of Indiana Jones. And honestly, Stargate was kind of mostly Indiana Jones to begin with.
So let's and it wouldn't be one of these episodes without a bit of controversy.
Yeah.
Like we talked about with The Lion King, there was an anime that was blatantly what that movie was based off of, and sort of the same thing here. An anime called Nadia The Secret of Blue Water is very similar to the storyline of Atlantis, to the point where people who worked on that anime wanted to sue Disney for plagiarism. But the parent company pretty much did not go forward with any legal action because, much like we said with The Lion King, Disney is just too big a company. They have a lot of money and could drag out such a case for years if they wanted to. And they just did not have the money to fight against that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen the film, and I've read summaries, and I can sort of see where some of it might come from. It does seem to have something to do with a magical blue necklace that a woman wears around her neck, So I get that some of that, and of course it's underwater in submarines, and I think Atlantis is also involved, and okay. I can see where they're coming from. But yeah, it's one of those things of Disney has all the lawyers.
Yeah. There's been some comparisons to Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky, and like you said, comparisons to Stargate.
This movie, if you've ever seen Stargate and then you watch this movie, you're like, oh yeah, that's Stargate. It's honestly one of the reasons why I love this movie, because Stargate is also one of the main reasons I am a linguist. I have a Stargate tattoo. In fact.
So you have a degree in gibberish.
Tattoo. Yeah, I have a degree in gibberish. I have an Atlantis tattoo planned in much the same way, but I don't know if you noticed there's a pandemic on, and maybe getting needles shoved into you by another person breathing on it is not a great thing to be doing at the time. So all of that's on hold.
Yeah, they had a lot of faith in this movie, and we're going to pretty much turn this into a franchise. There was plans for a TV series that once they was already in production before this movie ever came out, which is always good for you to do before, go ahead with your sequel before you ever find out if your movie did well or not. When it came back that the movie underperformed, they completely ended production on the show. Only 3 episodes of the show was ever produced, and that eventually became Atlantis Milo's Return, the sequel movie.
I am so mad that they've not done more with Atlantis.
Yeah, and
I am so mad at every person who did not go see this movie when it came out.
There was also plans for a ride. A reskin of the submarine voyage ride at both Disney parks. You've been to Disney World, I believe you said that.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea submarine voyage ride?
Yeah, I did go on that one. That's one of the ones I remember, and I remember liking it.
That almost became the Atlantis ride.
I am so mad about that.
They were looking to update the ride, and they were looking for a new theme for it. And Atlantis, it has a submarine. It's about going underwater. It could work as a submarine ride, and they were going to retheme both versions at Disneyland and Magic Kingdom to Atlantis. There's some pictures of that time with tarp saying Atlantis coming soon. And once the movie bombed, those plans stopped. And eventually, the Disneyland version was eventually rethemed to Finding Nemo, which it is right now. And the Disney World version no longer exists. It got demolished. It got demolished and became an expansion for Fantasyland. It is now the home of Winnie the Pooh.
Boo! This would have been a much better ride, especially since Atlantis already took a lot from Jules Verne. I mean, that's a lateral move at best.
So yeah, the movie did not do so well, and let's look at the competition. Shrek. I think I can stop there. It came out.
Unfortunately, you can, but I don't know.
It came out 1 month after Shrek. This whole decade, this whole 2000s decade, is filled with Disney releasing movies at the wrong time and getting creamed by the competition.
I'll give you Shrek for this one.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you Shrek. I understand why that had a broader appeal, and it's a good movie. Let's go ahead and get into
who's in this.
The cast of this, because the cast is great. One of the best casts that Disney has put together, in my opinion. I'm not gonna fault them for stunt casting at any level on this one, because this cast is flawless. In our lead, we've got Michael J. Fox. Come on. It's Marty McFly. What?
It's Alex P. Keaton.
Yeah, Alex P. Keaton. I don't know. He and I have political differences. But it's Marty McFly.
Yeah, Michael J. Fox, a great actor. And I love the story involved with him being, he was offered this movie, and he was also offered the lead in Titan AE for Fox, the studio Fox. And he basically described both movies to his son, and his son thought that the Atlantis movie was cooler, and that's why he was in this movie.
Honestly, I think the Atlantis made more than Titan AE, so maybe his son was...
I mean, if you're going to make a movie,
correct,
if you're going to do essentially a kid's movie, you might as well get the opinion of a kid.
But yeah, he's brilliant. I'm not sure we really need to say much more about him. You know who Michael J. Fox is. As our villain of the film, our main villain, we've got James Garner as Commander Rourke. I mean, he's Maverick in Maverick. He's Rockford in the Rockford Files. Come on. I mean, he's great. What you gonna do with him?
Yeah.
He is the quintessential old school cowboy.
Which works for this movie, especially
before our generation. But it is. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cowboy references in this. You get the whole character of Cookie and all that. So having James Garner leading this sort of halfway Western throwback expedition, it makes sense.
Also, with the ideological differences between Rourke and Milo.
Yeah, and Garner sort of represents that old school. We don't go and study things. We just wander in and trump all over it and colonize it. He's very much that kind of guy.
We don't communicate, we conquer.
Yeah, and Milo is very much on the new wave end of that. Of like, no, we want to understand people. We want to create connections. We don't want to conquer. We want to coexist. So it's a good dynamic. As the subject of today's query, we have the incredible Cree Summer as Princess Kida.
I have waited so long to talk about Cree Summer. Tiny Toon Adventures, Codename Kids Next Door, Rugrats. If you were a kid in the 90s, you know this voice.
I mean, all you have to do is say she was Elmira, and that's it. Come on.
Yeah. We've talked about like Frank Welker and Mel Blanc and so many other great voice actors from our childhood. Cree Summer is up there. I would put if I had to make a list of the great female voice actors from my childhood, Cree Summer, Grey Griffin, Tara Strong, and I would even put E.G. Daily up there.
Yeah. All good choices. I'm not gonna quibble with any of them. I love every one of them. But I mean, it's not like she's retired. Cree Summer's
she's still
doing
active
stuff right now. She's still great. Stuff. If you're less into anime and more into live action, you may remember a 90s sitcom called A Different World.
Oh yeah.
It was a spinoff of Cosby Show, if I remember correctly.
It was.
And it was about a
college student,
historically black university and the students that went there. So it had a largely black cast, which was, it was becoming more common at the time, of course. But it was still a trailblazer in that sense. And it took me forever to realize that the same chick that was on that Different World, which I watched every week, I loved that show. It took me forever to realize that my favorite character from A Different World was also the voice of Elmira on Tiny Toons at the same time. It was so cool.
Versatile.
Yeah. But she is. Yeah.
Yeah,
great.
She also voices Kida's mother in the opening scene, which I do like.
Yeah, it's a nice continuity there. So yeah, she's amazing. Go look up more of her work if you're not familiar. Mm-hmm. Okay, we getting into our kind of, supporting cast. We've got the character of Vinny, our explosives expert, and this is a cool one for us as comedy fans and comedy music fans. This is Don Novello, who is most known for being Father Guido Sarducci on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, SNL alum.
Yeah, and honestly, I didn't know for the longest time it was the same guy. I just knew him as Father Guido Sarducci. I didn't know him as Don Novello. So, you see his name on the credits and it doesn't really click. But, yeah, it is not a very different voice. So I really should have put that together much sooner than I did. But yeah, he's a comedian who has had like an extremely long career. He was even doing stuff up until like showing up on Colbert Report and stuff not that long ago.
And occasionally he'll pull out Father Guido Sarducci every once in a while.
I think that's what he did on Colbert Report, if I remember correctly. So we've got as Dr. Sweet, our medic, we've got Phil Morris, who is another one of those great voices that
Speaking of he's also the lawyer Jackie Childs on Seinfeld.
He is on Seinfeld. He did a lot of guest appearances on live action shows. He was on Babylon 5 at one point, I think. He was on a couple of Trek things. I think he was in one of the Trek movies, Star Trek 3. He was in Star Trek 3. And he was also, his very first role was in the Star Trek episode Miri. That's the one where all the kids are like, stupid grups, bonk bonk on the head. And like, once you hit like 16 or whatever, you get a disease and you die. Yeah. He was one of those children. So, but now he's mostly connected to, the DC animated stuff. He does a lot of the, superhero voices for, DC.
Currently plays Silas Stone on, Doom Patrol on HBO Max.
That's right. He does. He's like a Vandal Savage and stuff. So here's an interesting thing while we're talking about Dr. Sweet, because he's actually kind of a groundbreaking character for Disney. He is, so we've talked about how long Disney had been, and this is 2001 now, so we're about 80 years into Disney animated history, that Dr. Sweet in Atlantis is basically the first black character in a Disney feature animated film, as far as one that has a name. It's not there as a stereotype joke. It's just a character.
And they made him a doctor.
Which is just kind of cool. But yeah, you would think, when I read that, it was kind of mind blowing, because I'm like, it did not take them 80 years to put like a fully fleshed out black character in one of their films, but apparently it did. he was also animated by a man named Ron Husband, who also holds the, I don't know, dubious distinction, maybe you'd call it, to be the first black person to earn an animator credit in a Disney feature animated film. There were people who were before him. A man named Floyd Norman, I know, did some work prior to that, but it was interesting that, you know, no black animator had really received a full credit in a film until Ron Husband came along, and then he got to animate, as part of his career, the first black character that they put in. So while a lot of black voice talent and singers and stuff like that had been used by Disney, they weren't really the face of Disney until after the year 2000, which seems unthinkable.
Yeah, and a few years later we would get Tiana, and I mean now we got Soul.
Yeah. And there have been just other black characters since then as well that are just rounding out the cast, and that not always the lead, but just they're in the world now.
A featured player.
Yeah. But it's not like one of the better known facts I think about this movie, and I think Disney might have been a little embarrassed by it. Like, it's kind of obvious that Tiana was the first black princess, but I'm not sure that it's really obvious to people that, like, it took them 80 years to get to Dr. Sweet. I mean, bravo for progress, but so, I thought that was kind of an interesting tidbit as we are in Black History Month now and everything. Not like that's the only time we ever talk about these issues, but especially kind of poignant now. So, okay. One of the reasons why I thought this movie was the coolest when it came out, as our other sort of villain, Helga
Sinclair,
we have the amazing Claudia Christian.
I met her once.
Susan Ivanova herself.
Ivanova. I'm sorry. I actually met her at MarsCon a few years ago when she was the guest of honor.
Yeah, I ran into her back in the day when Babylon 5 was kind of still a going concern and everything. Especially once it ended up on TNT in the 5th season. Since that was based in Atlanta, they would constantly get basically the entire cast every year to Dragon Con. So really cool. She is amazing. She is wonderful. Her voice is gorgeous here. Do you really need to say anything more than Ivanova? If you don't know Babylon 5, go watch it. I will plug another streaming service. It is on HBO Max. They have recently done a remaster of it. It looks gorgeous. Go watch it.
Yeah, that came out fairly recently.
Yeah, within the last month or so. So yeah. Anyway, moving on. As our adorable mechanic, our teenage mechanic, Audrey Ramirez, we have Jacqueline Obradors. I believe that's the way you pronounce her name. She is best known for a character on NYPD Blue named Detective Rita Ortiz. That's not really my show. This is what I know her from.
I'm just happy that we have some Puerto Rican representation in the Disney movie.
No, absolutely. Yeah. She, I believe, she is of Argentinian descent herself as an actress, but the character is
Puerto Rican, yeah.
Is Puerto Rican. But yeah, she plays you know, she's that woman that shows up on a bunch of things. She's shown up in the George Lopez show. She's shown up in Castle with Nathan Fillion.
If you need a Latina actress, she's pretty much the one that you call at that point.
Yeah, she was especially that woman for a while. I think the field has broadened, but I think during most of the 90s it was that was her. She does such an amazing job in this movie. I absolutely love Audrey as a character.
When I first saw this movie, I could have sworn it was like Rosie Perez. But that was...
Yeah, she does have a sort of Rosie Perez kind of feel to her delivery, yeah.
And considering, you know, it was around the time of Road to El Dorado. I think Rosie Perez was actually in that, so it's similar sounding characters.
Yeah, I can see that distinction. I don't think I ever pegged her voice, and honestly I wouldn't, because I don't watch this sort of show she's mostly in. She does kind of mostly, you know, cop dramas and things like that are just, that's not my thing. So moving on, we've got as Bertha Packard, our radio operator, sarcastic old lady. We have Florence Stanley. She basically played that same character in everything she was in.
Typecasting.
Yeah, but she was so good at it. If you needed that type, you know?
Yeah.
And she was in sitcoms for decades. People our age might know her best for being the first voice of Peter Griffin's mother, Selma Griffin, on Family Guy.
One of the few modern... go ahead.
I believe she is also the voice of the waitress in Goofy Movie. And we didn't really talk about her then because it's kind of a small part. But in the diner where Goofy says, you know, oh, you can be the navigator, she is, I believe, the waitress in that as well.
One of the few modern Disney characters to smoke.
Yeah, this may be the last Disney character to really smoke. In that sense.
Every scene she's in, she's got a cigarette in her mouth.
Yeah, this was right at the end of the point where you could really get away with that in a kids movie.
Because after that, the whole Truth campaign started, and
you
know, we can't advertise cigarettes to children.
Yeah, they changed a lot of the laws and standards on tobacco use in film right about that time. Yeah. But yeah, I love that character because she's just so fun. One that we don't really need to talk about because we've talked about him in like 3 other movies by this point. David Ogden Stiers.
Cogsworth.
Yeah.
Governor Radcliffe.
Cogsworth. Governor Radcliffe.
The Archdeacon and Hunchback, yeah.
And Jumba.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked about him 4 times already.
Yeah, I mean, come on, you don't have to say anything else. In this one, he plays Harcourt, who is the guy who basically fires Milo at the beginning of the movie. I think they tossed him in a kind of he's our good luck charm kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of like how
for this one.
Yeah, kind of, you know, like Disney and Pixar has their good luck charms now, like Alan
Tudyk now.
Yeah, Alan Tudyk is kind of Disney's good luck charm now.
Yeah. So moving on, we've got John Mahoney as our Whitmore, the millionaire that funds the expedition. Most people know him best as Frasier's dad.
Yeah.
He was Martin Crane on Frasier for the entire time. Probably his best known role. He showed up in a lot of films. He showed up in like Coen Brothers films, Hudsucker Proxy and Barton Fink and stuff like that.
Ironically, Lloyd Bridges was originally supposed to be playing Whitmore, but apparently passed away before he could really record any lines.
Yeah, and apparently Whitmore was originally going to be like a kind of sedentary exposition character. He was just going to be like, here, Milo, here's a diary. I'm going to fund your expedition. Go forth and find Atlantis. And that was going to be it. Yeah. But in the final movie, he's got like energy and he's doing yoga and he's bouncing around and he's like a real character.
He's wearing nothing but a robe and Milo can see it all.
Yeah. And apparently that's just because John Mahoney had that kind of energy. And so they retooled the entire character based on him.
Yeah.
Really cool. Anyway, we have as Cookie, the chef, if you can call him that, the Western kind of cook. We have in, unfortunately, his final performance, the great Jim Varney.
Ernest himself.
Yeah. You know him best from all the Ernest movies. Disney fans will know him because he's the Slinky Dog in Toy Story movies.
Yeah. Much like, he also passed away before production was complete. Stephen Barr actually voices Cookie in the final scenes of the movie because Varney passed away.
Yeah, unfortunate that, but yeah. And we have as the last member of our expedition team, Mole Moliere. We have Corey Burton. Corey Burton is the current voice of Captain Hook for Disney. Mm-hmm. He also voices Professor Ludwig von Drake, the duck character that shows up in a lot of Disney stuff, and DuckTales and everything sometimes. He does a lot of work for Disney. I mean, he does extensive work for Disney. He does a lot of narrations for the parks. He does a lot of character voices. He took over some voices, like he took over for Rip Torn as Zeus in the Hercules series and subsequent things. He's a lot of voices in Kingdom Hearts and stuff like that, He
was the original voice of Shockwave in the original Transformers.
Yeah. So if you're a Disney fan, you hear his voice a lot, is our point there. And of course, the final member of our cast, the one who really needs no introduction, it is the great Leonard Nimoy.
Oh, finally Spock Leonard himself. Nimoy shows up after last week.
Yeah, but yeah, we have him as King Kashyyykim, the
King of Atlantis.
The King of Atlantis and Kida's father. So,
fuck. You can't really say much about, that's it.
Yeah. It's Leonard Nimoy. Leonard Nimoy. I'm not going to say any more about it. Let's jump right into our thoughts on the plot here.
Milo's whole obsession his entire life was the lost city of Atlantis, and he's kind of ridiculed for it by his peers at the museum that he works at because it's a myth. It's a legend. We deal in facts here at the museum. And the fact that he finally gets his breakthrough by correcting mistranslations of ancient texts. And, he wants that expedition to see if it's there, to see if it's real. And everyone just said, if I hear Atlantis one more time, I'm going to jump in front of the bus, all that stuff. It's like they don't want to hear from him anymore. I mean,
they're actively hiding from him. The funding committee is actively hiding from him. They tell him
they push his meeting up by time. Yeah, the wrong time. All of it. Like, oh, you didn't make your appointment was an hour ago because you didn't show up. You don't get your funding.
Yeah, and when he shows up to kind of chase them down, one of them actually screams, "How did he find us?" It was planned. It wasn't a mistake. It was these people are desperately trying to run away from him. He works at the Smithsonian, which is kind of cool, but he works in the boiler room. You have a feeling that he really only has his job because of who his grandfather was.
Yeah, his grandfather was a great explorer and probably a member of the Smithsonian at some point, and they're doing it as a favor to his grandfather. But
that's the feeling I always get. It's not really expounded upon in the movie, but you have a feeling that people really liked his grandfather, but they don't really feel the same affection for him.
because of this obsession over Atlantis. And they even make a mention of it. You know, your grandfather died in disgrace over this Atlantis thing. Don't follow in his footsteps.
Yeah, his grandfather was looking for something called the Shepherd's Journal, which was supposed to be a map of sorts, an accounting of Atlantis. Yeah. Milo realizes that some ancient runes were translated incorrectly and that the journal is probably not in Ireland, as was thought, but in Iceland.
Yeah.
One letter off.
I mean, that's what I was saying before of the ancient writing being linked to the English alphabet. And yeah, I mean,
runes don't always work that way. Also, Ireland and Iceland are the modern English translations of the names of those places. Ireland was known by many different names, by many different things, none of which were really Ireland until much later, and they wouldn't have been written in that type of runic language. And also Iceland had a different name when some of the early Viking settlers found. Yeah, so
it's a Disney movie. We're trying to simplify. We're trying to make it as simple as possible.
On staff, they literally drew him and based Milo's look off of him because they, quote, didn't know what a linguist looked like. So Milo looks and moves a lot like Mark Okrand. He was based off of Mark Okrand working on the film. You got a linguist on there. Just let him do a quick pass on the script and be like, does this make sense to anyone for languages? Because it really doesn't. It really doesn't.
Anyway, they straight up say no, and Milo quits. He throws in his letter of resignation, saying it's
as a threat. You know, give it to me or I'll quit. And he just underestimates how much they want him there.
They pretty much say, we need you, winter is coming, and you can fix the boiler.
Yeah.
That is the only value they see of Milo at the museum, as the guy that fixes the boiler.
And he only fixes the boiler by, like, banging on it.
Sometimes that's all that's needed.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's kind of, it really drives home how replaceable his job ends up being.
Yeah.
But as he's heading home, he gets kind of surprised by a gorgeous woman in his apartment, and it ends up being Helga. Yeah, she shows up and she's like, hey, I was sent to find you personally. There's this crazy millionaire hermit who wants to meet you. And he goes to meet Whitmore, who is maybe my favorite character in the movie as far as the minor characters go.
Yeah.
And he is just like so happy to meet Milo, but he's also testing Milo. He gives him the journal saying that it was a gift from his grandfather, who said to wait until the right time and then give it to Milo. And he waits to see Milo's reaction, and eventually Milo is like, look, with you or without you, I will swim my way to Atlantis if I have to, but I'm going.
And that's exactly what's like here, yeah.
Yeah, great. That's what I want. I wanted to make sure you had the same spark in you that your grandfather did. It turns out that he was incredibly good friends with his grandfather, and a lot of people have suggested that this might be Disney's first, like, gay couple. I'm sort of inclined to agree. I really, when I first saw this movie, as I was like, they're totally a couple. They were a couple, but it's like 1914, and you can't say that.
Yeah. Yeah, the period piece of this is actually pretty nice. and the retro future style of the equipment that they have.
Yeah, it's very steampunk. This is absolutely a sort of alternate history kind of feel. It's very steampunky, so if you're into steampunk and you haven't seen this movie, there's a lot to enjoy. It's not necessarily perfectly Victorian, of course, but it's, it's close enough. You can kind of squint. But
I do like the relationship here.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff with this relationship. It's whether or not you read it as a gay romantic relationship or just friendship, there is deep affection that Whitmore had for Milo's grandfather.
He has a picture of Milo's grandfather above his fireplace.
Yeah, he has like a whole shrine to the guy. It's like, I got friends who I love desperately and would do anything for. I don't have a single shrine to a friend in my house, okay? It's just not a thing I do.
It's like this was his final promise to to Milo's grandfather before he passed. And he even says, I get to die with a clean conscience.
Yeah, he promised him that he would fund the journey to find Atlantis, and he's like, I finally get to do it. The journal was found by Whitmore's expedition. He figured out the Iceland thing and sent a team to go find it. And now they're bringing Milo in for the final journey to Atlantis. They were always going to go to Atlantis. It was just a question of whether or not Milo was going to go with them, because they've already got this whole thing set up. They've got hundreds of people in the crew. They've got equipment built. They've got this huge submarine and diggers and explosives experts, and
they just needed someone who knew gibberish.
Yeah, they needed the linguist, and also to fulfill that promise to the grandfather.
And I thought the sequence of, well, what about my job? Didn't you quit? What about my apartment? Be taken care of. Where are my clothes? Packed. What about my cat? Meow.
I love that the cat is just there on his shoulder randomly. It's like, what about my cat? And then the cat's just on his shoulder, meow. And I love his astonished little well, okay then. It's such a great facial animation, that he's got this really great look on his face when he's like, okay, everything really is taken care of. I can leave tonight, Boy, let's talk about the look of this ship for a second. Their main submarine. This is the point where you can really see the Jules Verne inspiration. Because the artwork of the design of the ship it sort of feels a little, it's too high tech for the time, but at the same time it feels old. It's that nice middle ground. As far as this is this was at the time the Disney movie with the most computer graphics on top of 2D animation.
And it would get more and more and more until we're just completely CG animation.
Yeah, but this is a beautiful blend, and even though it really hasn't, I don't think this is like a, Blu-ray upgrade or anything that's on Disney Plus. I think this is just the original film.
Yeah, this is just the digitized film. Yeah, I don't think there's any upgrades.
While you can tell it is slightly older technology, it's still really pretty.
It still holds up.
Yeah, and some of the scenes are redos of scenes they had tried to do a few years earlier. Like, there is one part where they are running from lava, and it is almost the Aladdin carpet ride from the lava redone and so much better. And we talked about how that sequence didn't hold up in Aladdin. It holds up here.
It seems like all the computer shots that they wanted to do for the Disney Renaissance, they just redid it here with the new technology. There's one that they flat out admit is the ending scene in Atlantis and the ending shot of Hunchback, where they do the big pan out scene.
Yeah.
Like this, they straight up, they admitted they lifted it from Hunchback just so they can do it better. And it's amazing.
And they had updated that I think it's called multiplaning, where they'll layer the images on top of each other. They did it for Hunchback, and it kind of sort of worked. I mean, we talked about that. Sometimes it works and sometimes it looks dated. It works much better here. They had sort of gotten their own. You can tell the difference between the 2D animation and the computer animation, because the computer animation couldn't quite get the look of 2D animation at the time. But it blends so much better, and they kind of saved the computer-generated stuff for the more fantastical elements of the film anyway, so it doesn't really slap you in the face with, like, this is CG! You know, you're just like, oh, I see they used CG for the more magical elements. Anyway, moving on. You know, we've got our kind of introduction to all of our crew once Milo gets on the ship, and it's very much like various sort of meet cutes for all the crew of where, you know, Sweet wants to give him a medical once over and everything, but my favorite is when he meets Mole, and Mole scratches underneath his nails and pulls out the dirt from underneath his nails and sniffs at it, and he's like, oh, you are a cartographer, and then he sniffs again and he goes, and a linguist. And that's always been one of my favorite, the way he's just kind of like, ew. You know?
Yeah. Let's kind of go through the I guess you say a montage of them diving through the sea to get to Atlantis. This was supposed to be a longer scene, but then this movie would have been 3 hours long. I'm not kidding.
Yeah. It is a pretty long movie and pretty packed with stuff, so, you know. It's
over an hour and a half long, not by like 100, not even 1 hour and 40, which is long for a Disney movie.
Yeah, Disney movies are like, you know, 120, at least at this point in time they were. They've gotten longer.
I mean, Frozen 2 is 2 hours.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, you see the trip, and they end up meeting I forget what they call it in the movie, the monster.
The Leviathan.
Oh,
but the interesting thing is he tells the myth of the Leviathan, and then he goes, I think it's probably a statue or something to scare away superstitious people. But then they're actually attacked by a creature, and Milo very quickly realizes it is mechanical.
Yeah.
And one of the things about this is that the people of Atlantis were supposed to have this amazing technology.
Advanced society, yeah.
And we really see them kind of realizing, like, oh, they really did that. The audience has seen it before, because there is a bit where we see Atlantis at the height at the beginning of the movie. We kind of skip to the Milo bit, but there is a little kind of precursor to the movie where we get to see Atlantis at the height as it's they are suffering the calamity that befalls them, and we see, you know, these flying speeder bikes or whatever. You know, it's very Star Wars. That they have these speeder bikes that look like fish, and they've got laser guns, and they've got, you know.
It's almost Wakanda-like. I mean, when we mentioned Wakanda, it's very much like that.
It is very much a strongly anachronistic city, because it's supposed to be like 8,000 years earlier than the rest of the movie. And we see like force fields and, you know, all this other kind of stuff. So we, the audience, already realized that Atlantis was a massively upgraded situation. But this is the first time Milo is realizing that these myths aren't just myths. When they say there's a giant creature in the water, it's not a, you know, oh, they put up a statue because people then were dumb. No, it's like they built a giant mechanical sentry that is powered by magic or whatever. And who knows what we're going to find next. But, you know, they send out a bunch of fighter pilots, basically, in little attack subs to attack the Leviathan, and their crew gets devastated.
They lose half the crew in this attack.
Yeah, I was watching this movie with a good friend of mine. Disney Plus has that group watch feature, by the way. It works beautifully. My friend is in a different state from me. It wasn't like a breaking quarantine thing. Don't worry. But we were watching this movie together and chatting about it. And we realized this is one of the most deadly Disney films. There is a lot of death in this movie.
This could be, I think this is probably one of the things that made it so polarizing, is that it is just so anti-Disney. I mean, we've talked about that in some of the other films, and how Disney going against type really, at this point in history, did not work for them.
Yeah, but in that opening scene, only part of the city gets saved.
Yeah.
The rest of it is devoured by a giant tsunami. And we see, as the audience, I mean, it's not really super gruesome, but we see like the energy barrier coming over part of the city to save kind of the center part of the city where the palace
there are people locked out of this dome.
Yeah, and we see people like beating on the energy barrier, begging to get in, and then the next thing we see is the wave crashing over the energy barrier and swallowing the entire city. We have no idea how many people are on the outside. Thousands at least, maybe millions. Atlantis was shown to be a sprawling metropolis.
They at one point, Malo refers to it as a continent. So this was the entire continent that was devoured, and only the one city survived.
Yeah, and we have no idea what the death toll was at this point, but this is probably the single most deadly scene in any Disney film. And then the movie kind of keeps going, flash ahead to the submarine and the Leviathan. 200 people were on board that sub. They give us that number. Maybe 20 or 30 survived to the beach in the cave.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like 150 people easily just wiped out in that one scene.
Yeah. So now they're completely overwhelmed. They're undermanned. They're short.
Yeah. They're asking Milo, like, do you know how to drive a truck? Because we need to get all this stuff. And the answer is no. Milo does not know how to drive. They just have to tether.
It is a
his
comical
truck to
scene. It is a very comical scene of Milo trying to drive a truck, and he just doesn't know it all, to a point where he gets defeated and deflated when he has to get towed by the big drill.
Yeah. But, I mean, in 1914, not everybody knew how to operate an automobile. That was still a very
recent thing, yeah.
Yeah, it was a very recent thing. So, but I love this montage. They do another montage here. They do two really massive montages almost back to back in this movie.
And again, this whole thing was supposed to be like an hour of the movie.
Yeah. And it shows them going through this underwater cave system. And the thing I liked about this is that pretty much every weather pattern you'd find on the surface is in this. There's one part where they're in a blizzard. That probably felt familiar to you right now, didn't it?
Yeah. We're kind of going through a bit of a snowstorm here in the Midwest.
But there's parts where it seems almost tropical from the way they're reacting. Mm-hmm. There seems to be kind of an interesting. They get to one part and they're like, oh, there's natural phosphorescence in some of these things. So there's like an interesting chandelier effect. So they pitch their tent, and then we discover that interesting phosphorescence isn't phosphorescence so much as it is literal fireflies.
Yes.
As in, they start fires.
Yeah.
And they burn down the camp, and we lose more people. I like that everything down here is just slightly off. Like, we understand fireflies, but fireflies don't produce heat in that sense.
Yeah.
But in this one, they are, pyrotechnic flies. They're pyro flies instead of fireflies, I guess. I don't know. And it is horrifying because, again, we see more death, and it's kind of terrifying, especially for a little kid. We see people, like, in burning cars screaming before the thing blows up.
And we're kind of down to the named characters at this point.
Well, the interesting thing is we think we are, but then about 20 minutes later, there's actual, like, faceless goons again. So not everybody died.
Yeah, but backtrack with you, and I want to talk about the campfire scene where the group kind of invites Milo to be part of their little gang. I think, would be kind of been hard because we see them play pranks on him throughout the entire montage. So they kind of
mean. They're not like pranks. This is downright bullying. They are awful. It makes you not like these characters at the beginning of the movie.
And they realize this by this point. It's like, let's kind of be nice to him because, we are here because of him, kind of thing.
And also everybody else is dead.
Yeah. So they kind of invite him to be part of their campfire, and they kind of, each character kind of gives their backstory, open their souls up to Milo. Because they know about Milo's story, but Milo doesn't know anything about them. We learn about Sweet and how his dad, he's actually half Native American because his dad fell in love with a Native American woman, and he's actually part shaman, and not just a doctor, but he's a shaman as well.
Yeah. Black father and Native American mother, yeah.
Yeah. We learn about, Audrey, her father wanted sons, and he ended up with daughters. So his youngest daughter became a mechanic, and his eldest daughter became a boxer.
Yeah, I like the reveal of that when she's like, he wanted 2 sons, one to take over his auto shop and one to become the heavyweight champion. And she's like, well, I became a mechanic. And he goes, what happened to your sister? And she goes, oh, she's 24-0 with a shot at the title next month, which I love that reveal. And it's also great because as a woman, you see a lot of like tough athletic women, which Audrey definitely is, in movies. And it's always like, hey, where'd you learn to throw a punch? And they're like, I got 5 brothers and they taught me how to. But I like that her sister is the one who taught her how to throw a punch. They don't specifically say it in the movie, but that's the only person who, it would have been her father maybe, but her sister probably is the one.
Yeah.
So I like that that's not the traditional kind of sexist trope of like, how does a girl know how to throw a punch? It's like, well, my sister's on the way to be an heavyweight champion, so we're good.
We get, Vinny, his parents ran a flower shop before a gas leak blew it up, and which led to his love of explosions.
As opposed to in my case, where it just led to a trauma and a lifelong fear of gas stoves.
Huh.
Yeah. No, house across the street from me blew up when I was a little kid because of a faulty gas line. So yeah. I prefer electric ranges for that reason. Anyway,
so yeah, we get all of these backstories for all these characters. They just they're here because they have, their share of the reward of this expedition is going to help them take their dream. There is
one character's backstory that we don't get, who I've always wondered about. I mean, everybody wonders about Mole. We don't get his backstory. He's just a weird guy who likes digging in dirt, and we never know why.
The punchline, you don't want to know. You shouldn't have told me, and you shouldn't have told him.
Yeah, that's a good one. But we don't really get Cookie's backstory.
I mean, it's just it's implied that was just, he's an old guy. He speaks in that Western dialect. He probably was a part of a wagon train.
Except there is one line, and I don't know if it was ad-libbed by the actor or whatever, but at one point, he does say, sweet mother of Jefferson Davis. which, given the time and the age Cookie is... Did Cookie fight for the Confederacy? Because it really seems like he might have fought for the Confederacy.
Wouldn't doubt it.
I really want to like Cookie, so let's maybe move on from that. But it is a thing that I've thought about for years, because that is a very specific line to deliver, you know?
So yeah, the pyro flies burned down the camp because it was more men. And this is where
more equipment, more everything.
Yeah, more everything. And
Milo is injured in this series of events.
And this is where Milo meets Kida.
Yeah, the Atlanteans have been following them wearing these giant tribal masks.
Yeah.
Wooden, masks to make them look kind of monstrous. And
they do because of the pendants that they wear, it has a nice glow effect behind the mask. So you can't really see the person underneath it.
Yeah, it's a really cool effect. I like the way they use the CGI to do the glowing pendants and stuff throughout the film, the kind of magical effects. But Kida sees that he's hurt and she heals him. She puts the pendant and her hand on him and it heals him immediately.
And keep in mind that at the moment that he sees Kida's face, he's like totally infatuated with her.
Well, at first, is it,
I think he's shocked that she's human, or at least human in appearance.
Well, yeah, at first it's like, there's people down here, but then later, we get the great line of like, I swim pretty girl, which is one of my favorite lines in the movie.
But it's like, that's the big thing, is that he did not know that anyone survived. And according to all the text, no one survived.
And according to the other members of the expedition, they did not expect to find people. I mean, they were just coming to grave rob, basically. I mean, archaeology, grave robbing, there's a fine line. But, I guess after 8,000 years, it's archaeology instead of grave robbing. But they're all shocked that there are people here. And Milo gives chase and he starts screaming like, hey, hold up. And Kida starts speaking to him in Atlantean, and Milo kind of haltingly speaks back because he's been reading it, but he just doesn't know how it's spoken, which is also a major plot point in Stargate.
Yeah, he kind of gets the gist of it. He starts speaking a little. I'm so mad that they did not subtitle this scene. Every other scene with the Atlanteans are subtitled except this.
Well, yeah, there are little bits and pieces that don't get subtitled, but this is one of the main ones, and honestly, I can never really find like an accurate transcription of this and what it's supposed to mean in the movie. Like I said, this is a really difficult language to find things on. But as it starts to move up to like Latin and French and stuff, you start to get to the thing that he's trying to say, like, hello, we're basically the we come in peace kind of speech. And she's like, how do you speak our language? And he's like, well, I learned it in a book because it's very similar to Latin. And then she's like, wait, do you speak Latin? And he's like, yes, I do, and I also speak French. And she's like, wait, you speak French? And then they kind of realize, and they go through a lot of like romance languages and stuff, and they eventually end up at English.
Yeah, I love Mole, because Mole's French, and he says, bonjour, mademoiselle, whispers something in her ear that is likely offensive.
Well, he starts out with voulez-vous, and there's a famous song that the adults would know. So the implication is that he's asking her if she wants to go to bed.
And he rightfully gets socked, and everyone's saying, finally someone hit him.
Yeah, we've all been wanting to hit him for weeks. It's great.
And poor Audrey, because he wanted to be the one to hit him. And the fact that her sister's a boxer would have made it hurt even more.
Well, I don't know. Kida's had 8,000 years of practice. She seems to be able to handle herself. They get taken into the city because it's like Kida's like, we met an outsider and they can speak Atlantean, and so they take them to her father, the king, and Leonard Nimoy is not having it.
Yeah, there are no outsiders allowed in Atlantis. We don't know. I mean, there have been outsiders that come to Atlantis before. We don't know, but they say that outsiders are forbidden.
Well, here's the thing: is that earlier in the movie they find a bunch of shipwrecks, and he says there are ships from every era. So the implication is that people have been looking for Atlantis, and maybe somebody did, because there is a rule in place, as we see in the subtitles. Outsiders are killed. Nobody can see the city and live, is what the subtitles say. Yeah. The actual Atlantean text is basically like, there are outsiders and they have seen the city. There's no threat in it. But the subtitles specifically convey a threat of they will kill them. Mm-hmm. But because Milo is kind of nice and he understands Atlantean and he realizes the situation, he kind of glosses it over of like, we're sorry, we just came to explore and to learn, please let us leave. And the king is like, okay, well, you can leave. And then Rourke's like, at least let us stay the night, we need sleep and supplies. And the king's like, all right, you almost died, I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
And turns out that was a bad idea.
Yeah, we did skip over the scene of in the car with Helga Rourke and Rourke and Helga saying it's like we didn't expect people. That changes the plan. No, the plan goes ahead as the plan doesn't change.
It changes nothing. Yeah. So we already know by this point there's something up with Rourke and Helga, but Kida immediately is like, all right, come on, I'll show you around. And she starts showing them around the city. And it has one of my funniest things as far as language, because at one point they pass by a tattoo shop. And there's a joke of like Audrey talking about tattoos and, all that kind of stuff. This is the only bit of Atlantean text that directly translates into an English word. You know how you were talking about like one character and one English letter and all that kind of stuff? Mm-hmm. With the runes before? This is the only time that happens in Atlantean. Usually if you see Atlantean text, it translates to an Atlantean word and not an English word. But in this one, the sign over the tattoo shop does translate directly into English. And it says, fresh fish. And nobody's quite sure how that happened. But for some reason, the tattoo shop has a sign that reads Fresh Fish.
Maybe that's just the name of the shop.
It's the Fresh Fish Tattoo Parlor, I guess.
I've seen stranger name tattoo parlors.
Well, true.
So the whole point
I love that. It's such a great little Easter egg.
And the point, Kida's whole thing is that since Atlantis sank, they've lost most of their culture. Like no one in the city can read Atlantean. No one knows what's going. A lot of their culture was lost when they sank. And
they don't know how to fly the speeder bikes anymore.
Yeah, and it's been so long they've lost their culture. And Milo knows enough of their culture to help them get it back. It is a little bit of the white savior trope, but I'm willing to forgive it. I'm willing to forgive it because he's not all, I will save their culture. It's like, I will help you read these words and help you rediscover your culture rather than I'm going to save it and bring it back and all that.
Yeah, he doesn't tell her about her culture. He just literally reads. And then she goes, oh, wait, that's why, So she's still the authority on her culture in this movie. So it sort of mitigates that a bit.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they based this off of what supposedly happened when Napoleon went to Egypt. Mm-hmm. That Napoleon went to Egypt and he was wandering around looking at pyramids and he was going like, what is that great monument? And they're like, I don't know, it's just always been there. And then he would see hieroglyphics and be like, what do these symbols mean? And they're like, I don't know, they're pictures. I'm not entirely sure that's accurate. That does seem a little bit like whitewashing. Like, I found this great civilization as a white Frenchman, and I had to tell them that they were once great. You know, it's like, I don't know. I don't super trust Napoleon, but supposedly that's the story. And they were trying to do that here, except if you're going to Egypt and you're like 2,000 years removed from, you know, the greatness of Egypt or whatever, nobody is alive then, alive now that was alive then. Mm. In Atlantis, it seems like almost everyone that was alive on the day of the calamity is still alive. Kida was a young girl, but she's there. Her father looked exactly the same age, basically, 8,000 years ago when we see him in the first scene as he does when we meet him again. Mm-hmm. So it does seem, and they do say that the crystals they wear around their neck give them longevity, so it does seem like they age normally, and they're given a crystal that kind of, you know, keeps them young and fresh, and from that point on, they age very, very slowly. So while the king does die of seemingly natural causes, he dies of seemingly natural causes, like maybe 10,000 years old, we don't know. Kida is herself 8,000 plus, it seems, from what Milo says, and Kida confirms it. Yes, we do see children in Atlantis, so we know that their numbers have grown, but the adults should still know how to read this stuff, because they were adults when it happened. They should still remember this, because to them, they lived it. Atlantis being great is not a story that was told over generations. It's something that happened to these people personally, so this makes way less sense. Unless, I did think of one reason, possibly. We find out at the end of the movie it was the king himself that caused the calamity. He tried to control the crystal. He tried to use it as a weapon of mass destruction. It didn't like that and destroyed the city instead. Maybe the king got all the adults together and was like, we can't read Atlantean anymore. Nobody's allowed to teach their children. We don't know what the flying things do. We're not using them anymore. We don't know, you know?
This stuff caused our destruction. We're not going to use it anymore.
Yeah, it might have been an edict from the king of like, look, this almost wiped out our situation, so we're going, you know, Amish or something. Mm-hmm. Like, we're just not doing it. We're not sharing stories. We're not doing any of that.
Yeah. One thing I did kind of is the whole reason that they chose Milo to go with Kida. Like, you can speak the language. You're non-threatening. You know, she likes you. Why don't you get her to tell you all of her secrets so we can steal their treasure?
Yeah.
And he goes along with it for a while until he finds out what their secret actually is.
And then he's like, nope, I'm not doing it anymore.
Treasure hunting is one thing. Treasure hunting is one thing. Genocide is another.
Well, yeah, he helps Kida. He figures out a lot about the crystal and that it's hidden somewhere in the city and everything. He figures out the thing about the heart of Atlantis is in the eye of the king or something. And then he realizes that there's a page missing from the journal. And that's when we get the heel turn with Rourke and Helga, where they're just like, nope, we're kidnapping Milo and Kida. We're finding the crystal. We're plundering the city. We're going home. Rourke is actually pretty smart. He's the one that actually figures out what the little riddle means.
Yeah, because he's sitting on the king's throne after he's thrown him down, and actually sees the ruin, which matches what's on the page.
Yeah, the letter A. It was the letter A in the Atlantean alphabet was designed to be a map to where the crystal was. But he's the one that figures it out, and he and Helga take Kida and Milo down into the chamber that houses the crystal, and we know that the crystal has been dying. They've said throughout the movie that whatever magic keeps Atlantis alive and safe is diminishing. which is probably why the king is dying, is that the longevity crystals don't really work anymore. But they find the crystal in this cave where it's been hidden.
And it's covered with stone sculptures of the past kings of Atlantis, which Kida just starts praying to the past kings right then and there.
Yeah, she's immediately in reverence, and they're like, ugh, stop her.
Because, you know, non-Christian religions, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. It is over a pool of water that they can't cross, and the second one of them touches the water, the crystal just starts beaming red light, and
very similar to the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, danger, you know. And then it finds Kida, and we have a reproduction of a scene at the beginning of the movie, which we haven't really talked about yet, so let's talk about it here, where Atlantis is in danger, and suddenly a light comes down out of the heavens and basically kidnaps Kida's mother.
Yes.
And we find out what the source of that light was in this scene, because the crystal sends out a beam of light, finds Kida wearing the crystal pendant, and possesses her in the same way as it did her mother. And it merges with her. It draws her to it. It lifts her up in one of the most beautiful shots in the film. The shot of her floating up to the crystal is one of the most beautiful images in the whole film.
And I like that her last words before she merges with the crystal is, "Don't be scared, Milo."
Yeah, and also as it starts to happen, she says "mother" in Atlantean. Which they say that the crystal is powered by the spirits of the dead, basically, and that sometimes it would merge with a human if it needed a physical form to deal with danger. So I kind of wonder if she was hearing her mother's voice in that moment.
It's possible.
That, you know, we don't hear it, but that the crystal is like, Kida, come to me, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, it merges with it, and then it very bizarrely chooses to go with Rourke and Helga.
Yeah, she's the crystal possessing Kida just goes with them, walks into their little cage containment thing, like willingly. Again, I think it's a lot of it. I don't know the reasoning or what if the reasoning. It's just maybe it was the only way to protect Atlantis was the crystal knew that it had to go just to protect the people.
Yeah, that there might be bloodshed. You know, that if it tried to resist, the people would try to fight, and then this, you know, overwhelming force might, you know.
The effects on Kida in this crystal form is amazing.
Yeah. Although, watching it now has a bit of a different, it hits a bit differently, because she turns into that crystal form, and I immediately started going, we are the crystal gems. Because it's a very similar kind of
form,
feeling for a second. But it is interesting, and it is very beautiful, and the mix of 2D and computer effects for that is just so good. But they package Crystal Kida into a box, and they're like, we're gonna take it, and they take it, and they start going.
And they leave Milo
up.
They leave
Milo, and Milo's like, you know,
this is what you wanted.
How dare you do this? All you care about is money. And Audrey's like, no, that's not what I care. I signed up for a payday, yeah, but I didn't sign up to hurt people. And then Denny's like, yeah, I mean, we've done grave robbing and tomb raiding, and we might have hurt somebody, but it wasn't nobody we knew. You know, it's like,
yeah, that's such a line that you would get from Don Novello there. That's just only he could deliver that kind of line.
Yeah, it's a really great delivery of that line.
But
like, maybe somebody got hurt, but it wasn't anybody we knew or had to look at.
It's coming. I mean, Milo puts the guilt trip on them, using their own backstories against them. Like, would your father be proud of you doing this? You know.
Go start your flower shop. You can probably start a chain of them with the corpses of the dead in Atlantis, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, he's straight up saying is like, yeah, you got your reward, but these people, the blood of these people's death will be on your head.
And all of the named crew, except for Helga and Rourke, turn around and they're like, nope, we're staying with Milo in Atlantis. We're not going with you.
And Rourke says, a fine time for you guys to get a conscience after all the stuff that we've done.
Yeah, but then he's like, but you know what? Bigger payday for me and Helga, so whatever, stay here and die.
And then they blow
because
up
they've already stated that as soon as the crystal leaves, the people of Atlantis are going to die not long after that because their protection is gone, their magic is gone.
They'll age, pretty much.
Yeah. And possibly the thing that's been giving them, like, sort of sunlight for the food and stuff like that. That stuff seems like it's gonna go as well. But they blow up the bridge out of Atlantis behind them as they leave, and Milo and all the characters are stuck there, and then Milo's like, no, we gotta stop this, and they're like, oh, what are we gonna do, fly after them? And Milo's like, oh yeah, they have flying machines, and I figured out how to work them.
Yeah, the king dies, passes his crystal on to
Milo, yeah.
Yeah, and explaining the whole situation, what's going on. The king wanted to use the crystal as a weapon, and it backfired. And he's pretty much telling her that he can get Kida back because Kida hasn't fully merged with the crystal yet.
Yeah, and as long as they get Kida back before the merge process finishes, they can remove her from the crystal.
And then they get the flying machines, and they get a little bit of an army together, and they go after, and we get our big.
I love Vinny's thing about the flying machine is Milo is teaching people how to use the crystals to power the flying machines, and Vinny goes like, "Do you have anything sportier, like a tuna?" Because they all look like fish, and I love it. Yeah. But yeah, they follow and they discover by accident that, like, oh, these flying machines also have, like, lightning weapons on the front of them. So now we can shoot laser beams.
And we go back to, we kind of passed over it, but Atlantis is right outside an active volcano, or a dead volcano at this point.
Yeah.
Chekhov's volcano, as it were.
Yeah, so the plan for the bad guys that was set up earlier in the movie is that they're gonna blow up they're gonna send some weapons up to the top of the volcano and kind of blow open the top of the volcano again, which has kind of solidified with magma that has turned back into solid rock that is closing the entrance. And then they're just gonna use a balloon to fly up out of the top of the volcano.
Yeah.
The caldera of the volcano.
And yeah, as our villains
it's starting to work. I mean, they get the top of the volcano blown open. There's sunlight coming through. They get the balloons going. Yeah.
But apparently, the balloon isn't rising as fast as they should because they're trying to avoid Milo and the crew and the Atlanteans. So they need to jettison something, and it's right out of The Great Mouse Detective. As the bad guy just throws off his subordinate right off the edge.
Yeah, Helga is trying to find, like, equipment and stuff to throw over, and Rourke says, we need to lighten it up, and she says, well, unless somebody wants to jump, and he goes, you first, and he kicks her off.
Miraculously, she survives this fall, which has to be, like, 20 stories.
Well, first, though, she doesn't even fall. I mean, she goes over the edge, but she catches herself on the railing and is able to flip back up and fight him for a little bit.
Yeah, so it's like, we had a deal. It's like, yeah, I should have got it in writing.
But he's able to get the upper hand and actually hurl her off. And for a while, we think she's dead. But Milo is able to get onto the balloon and start fighting Rourke. Except Milo can't fight. So Rourke is beating the crap out of him. When we see that Helga has survived and has a flare gun on her, and she decides, if I'm not getting out of here, you're not either, and she shoots the balloon so that it starts, descending and machines start breaking.
Because the humanity, as it were.
Yeah.
Milo falls off as this explosion happens, breaks the glass on the containment device, the little containment box, is able to slice Rourke's arm with this shard, which apparently now freezes him like it froze Kida earlier when she was put in.
Yeah, it infects him with part of the crystal, and this, I've got to say, is one of the most gruesome and horrific villain deaths in a Disney movie ever.
Yeah.
We talked before about how Scar was probably the most gruesome because you see the shadows of the hyenas, and we talked about the fact that for a brief second you can see the shadow of a hanging body. In Tarzan, sorry. We watch every painful millisecond of Rourke turning into a crystal monster.
Yeah.
As he screams and desperately tries to claw at his own skin to stop the process. To the point where eventually he becomes possessed, tries to fight Milo a little bit, and then explodes.
Yeah. This is like some final boss stuff in the video game.
Yeah, and it is up close and personal as you see every pained expression. I don't know, if I had seen this when I was a little kid, if I'd have seen this at like 7 or 8 instead of in my late teens or early 20s in the first go around,
mm-hmm.
This might have been nightmare fuel. Because
I could see it.
It's pretty gruesome.
For a Disney movie, yeah.
Well, and again, especially for a Disney movie.
I can see, again, this is part of the disconnect from the general audience to what Disney was trying to do. Again, this is 2001. Tarzan had just come out 2 years prior. We're just 2 years away from the end of the Disney Renaissance. So that's what people think when they see Disney. And to suddenly have this much, as you say, it's this much death in a Disney movie just disconnects the audience from what they're expecting in it. The fight ends up reactivating the volcano.
Yeah, they say earlier in the movie the only thing that would reactivate the volcano was a large explosion, and it turns out that Rourke's crystal body is that explosion. So the volcano starts coming back to life. It starts rumbling. The magma starts melting through the crust there that they were walking on. And everybody's like, we gotta go. And Milo's like, if we don't take the box with Crystal Kida back to Atlantis, it's gonna die. And they're like, well, it's probably gonna die anyway, but okay. And Milo heroically jumps onto quickly melting lava to
wrap that chain around
Kida.
That box.
Yeah. Good for Milo. And they fly him back, and they get Kida back to the center of the city, and Milo is able to pry open the box as they're like, we got maybe seconds before this volcano explodes. And Milo's like, no, if we can save Kida, she can probably save the city, because that's what the king said happened before. The crystal merged with a human and saved the city.
And
so
he activates the statues that we saw before of the great kings of the past, which activates other stone statues, which is what formed the barrier to begin with.
Yeah, we didn't see that really at the beginning of the movie, what formed the barrier, but now we see these giant, almost kaiju-sized stone statues come
very
to life.
Iron Giant looking characters.
Yeah, they surround the city and they clap their hands, which forms a barrier, and they extend the barrier all the way around the city, and lava swallows the city and then solidifies and then breaks off, and the city is back again.
And not only that, but because Kida reactivated the defense mechanism, it reactivated the entire city. So all of the ruins that we've been seeing throughout the entire movie are now back to the way they were before.
And now that the danger is past, the crystal lets Kida free, and it returns her back to her people.
And she gets her bracelet back that her mother took when she was a kid. One final gift from her mom.
Yeah. So we see that they send the Atlanteans did have quite a lot of treasure, actually.
Not
They
that
had
they're
a
going to
lot
use
of
it, you know.
a lot of gold and jewels and, other, bits and bobs that they're
Precious
stacking
stones,
up. And they're giving it to the crew, the Explorer crew, and they're saying, "Oh, we only wish we could do more. You saved our city." And they're like, "No, we'll be fine. You have no idea how rich this is gonna make us. We're good."
So yeah, the crew goes up and Milo stays behind.
Yeah.
He's gonna stay with Kida.
Yeah, when the crew gets back to the surface, they go to see Whitmore, and
they make up a story.
He says, "Okay, let's get the story straight. You didn't find anything. You found some rocks, and that was it.
Everyone who didn't come back died."
Yeah, they all died or disappeared. Poor Milo, he also died. Tragic. And we're all rich now. And they are all filthy, stinking rich.
Yeah, the way they're dressed, they are just...
They're all dripping in furs and jewels,
diamonds
and stuff.
And
yeah.
Cookie even has a diamond tooth.
Yeah, Cookie even has a diamond tooth. But they all agree on their story. They're going to leave the secret of Atlantis buried. They're going to let Milo and Kida live in peace. And we return one final time back to the city, where Milo and Kida are there carving the face of Leonard Nimoy's king, Kida's father, so that he may join the rest of the kings of the past in protecting the city. And here's the thing that people don't talk about when talking about Princess Kida. She's queen at this moment.
Yeah, she is not a queen.
She ends this movie as Queen Kida.
Say well, Elsa Who, Kida was the first Disney queen.
Yeah. And we see her and Milo climb to the top of the tower again to get that final shot of the city as it is in its revitalized state, as the face of Leonard Nimoy's character, ascends up to the heavens. And
we see all
the
Atlanteans are flying in their flying fish devices again, and we get, like I said, the panning shot that they were trying to do for Hunchback, but now the technology advanced and they can do it properly in this movie.
Yeah.
There's one scene that it's a blink and you'll miss it shot. I didn't notice until this rewatch. Audrey has Milo's cat.
Yeah. There's another blink and you'll miss it in the fact that we do sort of see Mole out of his mole costume.
He's wearing sunglasses, though.
He's wearing sunglasses, but he is dressed more quote-unquote normally, and then he dives into a pot of...
Yeah, he hates...
dirt.
Well, it kind of goes with earlier in the movie where Sweet is threatening him with a bar soap.
Yeah. He wants to be surrounded by the dirt. And so you don't really see him for very long, but you kind of see a couple of frames as he jumps into this giant pot of dirt and rolls around.
He's pulling at the clothes. He just hates wearing this clothing.
Yeah.
And just jumps into the dirt. A flower pot. He's taken off all the clothes. He's back in the flower pot. He's among where he wants to be in the dirt.
You know what? As long as he's happy and he's not hurting anybody.
Exactly. Live your life the way you want to live. I just hope Audrey is taking good care of Milo's cat. Oh,
I'm sure she is. She seems that sort of person. But yeah, so we gotta ask the question here about Kida.
Does
I am
Kida
gonna say,
deserve to be a Disney princess among the Disney princess official canon?
I love that there is a moment where Milo, great linguist, hears that her name is Kidakakash, and he can't pronounce it. And I'm like, it's not actually that difficult a name. Like, there's no sound in there that is not already in English. It's not like you have to learn a new phoneme for that, you know? It's like...
I'm thinking that joke is for the kids, so they can have a name to sound. They wanted to have they wanted her to have a more otherworldly name, and then a name that the kids can call her.
Yeah, but you know how there are some people who will be like, come over here and speak English, and I'm going to order a tortilla now. Josie? Yeah,
Josie?
Josie, bring me my tortilla. You know, it's like that kind of thing, and I'm like, ooh, Milo, don't be that guy. Like, it would be fine. I just wish they had changed it to be like, well, my name is Kidakakash, but you call me Kida.
Yeah,
like
my friends
call me Kida. Like, that would have been better than Milo, the linguist, who somehow knew this language despite never hearing it spoken, suddenly being like, I can't pronounce your rather simple name.
So, does Kida belong, or should she be a member of the Disney princess canon? We've already established that she's a queen at this point, but I want to say yes so much for this character, because I really do like this character.
Yes. She is everything a Disney princess is supposed to be. She is regal and beautiful and elegant. Brave. She is brave. She, you know, I mean, if you're going to let Mulan in on the do a brave deed thing, Kida sacrifices herself to save a city, you know?
There has been apparently an official, apparently when asked about Kida, apparently they say that they have no plans to add, they didn't plan to add her to the Disney princess line, because she doesn't fit the mythology of the Disney princess, with kind of meaning that she's too old. Like, most Disney princesses are teenagers or in their early 20s, and she's 3,000 years old.
8,000
years old. I think that's butkus. It really is, because this movie did not perform as well as they wanted it to.
Yeah, I really do think that Kida would be a Disney princess and was intended, you know, as they started that line, it was probably she would have ended up on that line. But yeah, but people did not go see this movie, and I hate you all for not going to see this movie.
And I remember when Princess and the Frog came out a lot, and they were calling her, oh, she's the first, Tiana's the first black princess. So many people were bringing up Kida.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really get a specific ethnic group for the...
She is definitely of color.
Well, yeah, she's definitely not as white as some of the other characters. Mm-hmm. She is much closer in skin tone to somebody like Audrey. She's probably a little darker than that, you know? But it does straddle that line of a really, you know, a person without much melanin, but I sat out in the sun for a while, or, you know. So
I think the official...
But I would consider Kida a non-white or a character of color myself.
And most of the Atlanteans are also, you know, of color.
Yeah, they're drawn to portray a non-white European kind of feel, you know?
So yes, I think our official stance as of this podcast is that Kida deserves to be a Disney princess.
Yeah, Kida deserves all the trappings. There needs to be like an Atlantis part of the parks. This movie deserves so much more.
I wish we had gotten that ride. Like, make Submarine Voyage as an Atlantis ride.
I want to see Kida and be greeted in like Atlantean, you know?
I feel sorry for that character having to learn that now. I mean,
Well,
the actress having to portray that character.
well, you know, the thing is that cast members working in the Galaxy's Edge, I think, are supposed to kind of learn how to read Aurebesh because everything's kind of doubly written. So I know a lot of cast members have gone through the trouble of doing that, but like,
I see it as because like the character that whoever plays Mulan at the parks doesn't really speak Chinese and even makes an excuse of why she doesn't.
yeah, I've heard that sometimes they use the excuse of like, oh, I made a bet with Cricky today that I would only speak in English or something. So there's always a character reason, but like, I'm not saying that Kida has to speak fluent Atlantean or whatever, but it would be nice to have a stock phrase that all of the cast members just learned. You know,
that'd be nice. Some
two
sort
or
of
three short words,
a greeting.
like let me give you the Atlantean greeting or whatever. But now I will speak in English because I know that's what you will understand. Yeah. For you are not from Atlantis, you know. Like
or
that
even
kind of...
that they imply that she can speak French and Latin. You know, go with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to ask for from a cast member, and I know that nobody really, I mean, nobody over the age of like 12 would really expect a cast member to be, you know, multilingual in that sense, but it would be a nice flavor, you know, to like go in and see signs written in English and Atlantean, you know, like, I mean, they did it for Star Wars.
Yeah. Can
it's
you imagine
like
that if Atlantis was a better movie, instead of having Avatar Land at Animal Kingdom, you would have had Atlantis?
Oh my goodness. Avatar is such an awful movie, and Atlantis is such an amazing movie. Oh, I would give me some sort of, you know, let me wish upon a star that we can switch out.
This movie deserves more than what it got.
Yeah, I mean, so let's go ahead and answer the big question, which we've been answering. Yes, this movie has the magic.
Yes, this definitely has the magic. This
movie is full of magic. This is like one of the best Disney movies of the this is
2000s at least.
Yeah, this is probably one of the best movies of that decade. Like this and Lilo and Stitch for me are pretty evenly matched as far as how good they are.
There's a lot of similarities between this and Treasure Planet, and we did end up liking Treasure Planet.
Well, we did like it more than we thought we would, but this versus Treasure Planet, this blows Treasure Planet away by like galaxies. You know, this is so far ahead, you can't see Treasure Planet anymore.
It's better than Home on the Range and Chicken Little.
Well, almost anything is. Let's be fair. But honestly, I mean, Lilo and Stitch has become one of those movies that everybody just agrees is like brilliant. I would put this in a neck and neck race, and honestly, for me, this beats out Lilo and Stitch for me personally. Mm-hmm. But I would at least put them like neck and neck in a race, you know? Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just me, but I absolutely love this movie.
I would love for them to do something more with these characters. I know they won't because of the movie didn't do that well. This is considered a cult classic by most, but it's like this movie deserves better than what it got. There's so much more in this world they could have explored with a series, a ride, something. Characters walking around in the park. Although they probably would put shoes on Kida because walking barefoot at Disneyland is not a good idea.
Yeah, don't do that. It's just a health and safety issue.
But yeah, this movie has the magic. It came at the wrong time. And that's my personal opinion on this movie, is that it came at the wrong time.
If this had come out at any other time other than Shrek.
Yeah.
If this had come out versus almost anything else, I think this would have been a bigger hit. Because this movie is like mostly flawless. There's very little I could find to improve on this movie.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the big problems with these 2000s Disney movies. they all come out at the wrong time and just are swamped by their competition.
Yeah. I think Disney is a little more judicious now in making sure, like, this is my weekend.
Yeah, we're not gonna, there's no Harry Potter movies to compete against at this point.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's move on to next week, and our next princess, we are going to go to. You like video games, right? Don't you, Kiki?
I love video games.
Let's do a movie about video games. Wreck-It Ralph, Princess Vanellope von Schweetz.
Yeah.
Someone who actually met the Disney princesses. So we are going to argue for Vanellope von Schweetz as whether she should be a Disney princess or not. We're going to talk about this movie. Probably one of the most recent movies that we have talked about. Other than, I think the other one would be Zootopia.
Yeah.
But so yeah, tune in next week for Wreck-It Ralph. And if you, dear listener, has an opinion on Princess Kida or even Atlantis the Lost Empire, let us know. We want to know what you think about all. What's your opinion? Does Kida deserve to be a Disney princess? Yeah. So yeah, tune in next week for Wreck-It Ralph, and we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye. Don't let the magic stop here.
Join our conversation online on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic.
Twitter at Rewatch the Magic.
And of course, new episodes every week at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com.
Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.